3 weeks ago, my 15-year-old self-parents, 41-year-old female, 53-year-old male, welcomed my twin baby brothers Jonah and Isaac into the world. They are the sweetest bundles of joy, but were unexpected babies considering my parents' ages. Since their birth, my mom has been unavailable when the twins need something, whether she's in the bathroom or too occupied with other tasks. I know it's not work-related because she's a stay-at-home mom. My dad is never home, and my 17-year-old sister Nevaeh is too busy planning her wedding and experiencing mental breakdowns. I don't even think she loves her fiancé to assist me with anything. This leaves me to take care of the babies. It was manageable at first, considering the healing process after birth is difficult, and postpartum depression is a real thing. However, it doesn't seem fair that I bear the brunt of these responsibilities. For instance, this past Sunday at 6 in the morning, as we were getting ready for church, I had to wake the twins, feed them, bathe them, change their diapers, and dress them. I also had to prepare them for the car ride. I barely had time to get ready myself while my family was yelling at me to hurry up and get in the car. Thanks, Dad. Keep in mind, I am only 15 years old and also have marching band responsibilities. I simply cannot handle all of this mentally. And now we come to today. During lunch, my sister and I were discussing wedding planning. She's marrying our pastor's son, who is 19 years old, so it's a big deal. We were playfully arguing about floral arrangements. She was having one of her better mental health days, when suddenly we heard the twins cry. They screamed and cried, and I just sat there flipping through magazines until my sister started staring at me. The conversation went something like this. Me. What, Nevaeh? Nevaeh, slightly annoyed. Aren't you going to take care of that? Me. Take care of what? Nevaeh. The twins. Obviously. I don't know what came over me, but I groaned and yelled about how much I hated being their live-in nanny instead of their sister. I couldn't understand why Mom couldn't take care of them herself. I vented for a while, expressing my frustration about not being able to sleep or take care of my own needs because I always had to prioritize the boys. Neva gave me a nasty look and called me in butt for making Mom's life more difficult than it needs to be. She believes I should be grateful that our parents have given me the blessing of taking care of our brothers and bonding with them while they're still young. I asked her if it was such a blessing, why couldn't she lend a hand? This made her angry with me, and she walked away. It's been a few hours and my sister still hasn't spoken to me. It's clear that she's been avoiding me. So am I really such a terrible person for not wanting to take care of my brothers? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. You didn't have any input into having these twins. You should not be the primary caregiver unless both your parents are incapacitated. And your older sisters shouldn't be expecting you to do all the work while they sit around, especially when it's twins. However, I have been in similar shoes. My youngest sister was born when I was 15 and a half years old. I wasn't the primary caregiver, but I was a pretty serious caregiver, got up some nights, changed a lot of diapers, kept her occupied once she was awake more, with the added bonus of getting a lot of nasty looks and a couple of comments when we were out because it looked like I was a teen mom. The early 90s, my advice, get a job, join some extracurriculars at school, and generally be out of the house as much as possible. Find a library or park if you have to. Once you are reliably not around, the baby's actual parents will figure something out. Comment 2. Not the idiot. Your sister is 17 and marrying a 19-year-old son of a pastor. I'm guessing you live in Utah? Your name is Bethany, maybe? Man, I've seen this situation before. I have a feeling CPS is only going to land you in hot water. First thing in the morning, you need to get out of the house with activities. In the meantime, headphones. When the family pushes childcare on you, smile and reply, I have schoolwork and after-school activities that need my focus. God bless Mom and Dad with 2 babies, and I don't feel I'm mature enough to care for babies yet, since I'm just a freshman. But maybe that should be something Nevaeh should do since she's the one getting married. Edit to ask, did your sister help raise you by any chance? She's only 2 years older than you, but was she like a second mom? Now for the update. Thanks for all the comments on my last post. So a lot has happened since then. After my argument with Nevaeh, things got even more complicated. My mom's behavior didn't change. She was still unavailable when the twins needed her. I tried talking to her about it, but she just brushed me off, saying she was too tired or had other things to do. My dad continued to be absent, and Nevaeh was still wrapped up in her wedding plans. I felt like I was drowning in responsibilities. One night, about a week after my last post, I was up late trying to finish a school project when I heard the twins crying. I went to their room and found them both soaked through their diapers and screaming. I was exhausted and frustrated, but I changed them and rocked them back to sleep. As I was putting them back in their cribs, my mom walked in. She looked at me with this blank expression and said, "Why are you still up? You have school tomorrow." I couldn't believe it. I snapped and told her that I was up because she wasn't taking care of her own children. She just sighed and walked out of the room. The next day, I decided to talk to my dad. I waited until he got home from work and asked if we could talk. We sat down in the living room, and I told him everything. I told him how overwhelmed I was, how I felt like I was the only one taking care of the twins, and how I needed help. He listened, but his response was disappointing. He said that my mom was going through a tough time and that I needed to be patient. He promised to talk to her, but I didn't have much hope that things would change. A few days later, Nevaeh had another breakdown. She was crying in her room and I went in to check on her. She told me that she didn't want to get married, that she felt trapped, and that she didn't know what to do. I tried to comfort her, but I was also dealing with my own stress. I told her that she needed to talk to our parents and be honest about her feelings. She nodded, but I could tell she was scared. The next morning, Nevaeh announced that she was calling off the wedding. My parents were furious. My mom yelled at her, saying that she was being selfish and that she was embarrassing the family. My dad tried to calm my mom down, but it was clear that he was also upset. Nevaeh ran to her room and I followed her. She was crying and I hugged her, telling her that she did the right thing. But things didn't get better. My mom's behavior became even more erratic. She started disappearing for hours at a time, leaving me to take care of the twins. One evening, she didn't come home at all. My dad was worried and called the police. They found her at a motel on the outskirts of town. She was fine physically, but it was clear that she was struggling mentally. She was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. With my mom in the hospital, my dad had to step up. He took some time off work and tried to help with the twins, but it was clear that he was out of his depth. He was frustrated and short-tempered, and it only added to the stress. Nevaeh was still dealing with her own issues, and I felt like I was on the verge of a breakdown. One night, I was up late again, trying to finish my homework. The twins were crying, and I went to check on them. As I was changing their diapers, I started to cry. I felt so alone and overwhelmed. I didn't know how much longer I could keep going. I thought about running away, but I knew that wasn't a solution. The next day, I decided to talk to a school counselor. I told her everything, and she listened patiently. She suggested that I talk to a social worker and see if there were any resources available to help my family. I was hesitant, but I knew I needed help. The social worker came to our house and talked to my dad. She suggested that we hire a part-time nanny to help with the twins and that my mom needed ongoing mental health support. My dad agreed, and we hired a nanny. It was a relief to have some help, but it also made me feel guilty. I felt like I should have been able to handle everything on my own. The social worker also arranged for my mom to see a therapist regularly. She was diagnosed with severe postpartum depression and started treatment. Things started to improve slowly. My mom was more present, and the nanny took some of the pressure off me. Nevaeh was still struggling, but she was seeing a therapist and trying to figure out her next steps. My dad was more involved, but it was clear that he was still struggling to balance work and family. As for me, I was trying to find a new normal. I was still taking care of the twins, but I had more support. I was able to focus on my schoolwork and marching band, but I still felt the weight of everything that had happened. I realized that I needed to take care of myself too, and I started seeing a therapist as well. Looking back, I can see how everything led to this point. My mom's struggles, my dad's absence, Nevaeh's issues, and my own feelings of being overwhelmed. It was a perfect storm, and it forced us all to confront our problems. We're still figuring things out, but we're trying to move forward. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for keeping my roommate's stuff after they left me with a 900 fine eye? 21-year-old female used to live with two roommates, both 21-year-old females, in an off-campus student housing apartment. We used to be friends prior to moving in, but ultimately we did not get along as they were disrespectful of my property and our shared space. They both found housing for next year while I decided to stay in the same apartment unit. The apartment staff clearly stated that they were required to clean every apartment before the next tenant arrived. Thus, everything had to be empty before leaving. However, since I renewed my lease, I could keep everything in my room, but I had to leave the living room and kitchen completely empty. The day before my roommates moved out, they asked me if they could keep some of their boxes with me, and I said no. I was going home for the summer that day, and I thought I made it clear that they had to find other arrangements. I received an email a week ago stating I was fined $900 for failure to clean my space. I drove to my student housing apartment the same day to check on my apartment and speak to the housing staff. When I got to my apartment, I noticed several things still in my living room. These were my roommates' belongings, like their TV, vacuum, water purifier, dish rack, rice cooker, toaster, rug, couch pillows, ottoman, boxes, etc. I spoke to the apartment staff and explained that none of these things were mine and instead belonged to my roommates. Thus, I shouldn't have been fined. However, they explained that my roommates were no longer on the lease as of late May, thus any belongings in there would be my responsibility. In the end, they basically said there was nothing they can do, and I had to pay the fine, which was a lot of money, so my summer savings were basically gone in an instant. When I got home, I messaged my roommates and told them about the situation. They gave a half-assed apology and said they assumed it wouldn't be an issue since I had the lease, and we all collectively used some of the stuff they left. Thus, it was technically my responsibility too. I asked them to both pay me $450 each to cover the fine. They said no. To that I said, yeah, we all use those things, but now they're all mine. I had to pay the fine. I'm going to keep everything you guys left. They began to freak out and spam messaged me about how I'm being a jerk for keeping their personal belongings. I ignored the messages. Then they got on social media and blasted me for being a thief. I had many of their friends harass me. Now they're getting their parents involved, but so am I. I know whatever they left was probably worth more than the fine, but I'm not going to pay for someone else's carelessness. They assumed they could just come over after the summer and retrieve their stuff while bypassing the need to buy a storage unit or find other arrangements to store their stuff. Am I the jerk for keeping all my roommates' belongings after they moved out, despite them wanting it back? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, NTA, put them on blast. You both knew the requirements to have everything out of the apartment. You didn't, and because you didn't, there was a $900 fine levied against me for your abandoned property. If you want to reclaim the items, I am willing to sell them back to you. But as you abandoned them and caused me to pay a fine due to your actions, you either pay me for the fine plus headache, or you accept that you abandoned the items and they now belong to me. With the heartache caused, I would say minimum, it should be twice the fine to buy things back and stick to your guns. It's all or nothing. Comment 2. Old roommates are trash for leaving their stuff, but the housing company is trash for charging you. Isn't the whole point of charging a fee for something like this that they have to take the effort to remove the items for the next person? But they didn't remove them, they left them and charged you? You should get your money back. They didn't do anything for that $900. Now for the update. Thanks for all the comments from the last post. So here's what happened over the past 2 weeks. After my roommate's parents got involved, things escalated quickly. Their parents reached out to mine, and it turned into a whole mess of phone calls and emails. My parents were supportive of my decision to keep the items since I had to pay the fine, but they also wanted to avoid any legal trouble. My dad suggested we draft a formal letter to my ex-roommates, outlining the situation and our stance. We sent the letter, hoping it would put an end to the harassment. A few days later, I received a response from one of the parents, who was surprisingly understanding. They offered to pay half of the fine if I returned their daughter's belongings. I considered it, but I was still upset about how everything went down. I decided to hold off on responding until I could think it through. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the fallout on social media. The harassment continued, and it was affecting my mental health. I decided to block my ex-roommates and their friends, but the damage was already done. Some mutual friends took their side, and I felt isolated. I started questioning if I was in the wrong, but my parents reassured me that I was justified in my actions. One night I was going through the boxes they left behind, trying to figure out what to do with everything. I found a journal belonging to one of my ex-roommates. I know it was wrong, but curiosity got the better of me, and I read a few entries. It was mostly mundane stuff, but one entry caught my eye. She wrote about how she felt guilty for leaving the apartment in a mess and how she hoped I wouldn't be too mad. It made me realize that maybe they didn't intend for things to get this bad. I decided to reach out to the more understanding parent and propose a compromise. I offered to return the items if they paid the full fine. They agreed, and we arranged a time for them to come pick up the stuff. When they arrived, we had a civil conversation, and they apologized for the way their daughter had handled the situation. I felt a bit better after that, but I was still wary of my ex-roommates. After they took their belongings, I thought things would calm down. But then I received a message from one of the mutual friends who had taken their side. She apologized for the way she had treated me and explained that she didn't know the full story. We talked for a while, and she mentioned that my ex-roommates were having a hard time adjusting to their new living situation. Apparently, they were struggling with their new roommates and missed the convenience of our old apartment. This made me reflect on our time living together. Despite all the issues, we did have some good times. I remembered how we used to have movie nights and cook meals together. It was bittersweet thinking about how things had changed. I realized that while I was hurt by their actions, I didn't want to hold on to the anger forever. I decided to reach out to my ex-roommates and try to clear the air. I sent them a message explaining how their actions had affected me and why I felt justified in keeping their belongings initially. I also apologized for any hurt I may have caused by holding onto their stuff. It took a few days, but they eventually responded. They apologized for their behavior and admitted they had handled things poorly. We agreed to move on and not hold any grudges. In the end, I learned a lot from this experience. It was a harsh lesson in setting boundaries and standing up for myself. I also realized that sometimes people make mistakes, and it's important to communicate and try to understand each other. While things will never be the same between us, I'm glad we were able to find some closure. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for refusing to pay my ex's fiance $100 a night to take care of my own son? Okay, so my son's father sees him for 2 nights every fortnight. He picks him up late Friday night and drops him off early Sunday morning every 2 weeks. Now, when he first started being consistent, I would offer money to make sure my son was fed and safe. I only did this because for the last 5 years, he would give excuses of, I have no money to feed him, or I have no petrol. My son adores his dad, so I offered the money so that he had no excuse not to spend time with our son. After about the 3rd time of being consistent, his dad said, "You don't need to offer me money anymore. I'm working full-time and want to step up more." I didn't ask for child support. I never have. Everything my son has, all his toys, all his clothes, all his school stuff, every experience he has had, I have paid for, and I am proud of that fact. Fast forward to a month ago, and I received a message from my son's stepmother. They aren't married but have been together for 3 years, have a child together, and are engaged. So it's easier to describe her as the stepmother. The message had said that it isn't financially fair on them to have to pay for things my son wants when with them. She has asked for $100 a night, so $200 a fortnight, to pay for his food, clothes, anywhere they go, and any toys he wants when with them. I responded with, "If he wants a toy when with you, either you or his father can message me and I will happily transfer the money to one of you, as long as the toy comes home with him." She said it was irresponsible parenting on my behalf for not wanting my son to have nice clothes and toys when at his dad's house, and that anything bought with them should stay with them. I agreed and said anything they buy for him should stay. She then made a big deal and posted on social media about how I'm a bad mother and refuse to take financial responsibility for my son. I screenshot it and sent it to his father and explained the situation to him. He apologized and said he had no idea. She then messaged me accusing me of trying to break up their relationship because I am a jealous ex, and that she doesn't think it's right that she should have to babysit my child for free. I said that's fine. If my son isn't seen as part of your family and is just a child being babysat, then maybe the custody situation should be revised. I know it's harsh because I don't blame my son's dad, I'm just at such a loss and feel like a major jerk. Am I the jerk? To add thank you to the helpful comments, I didn't put it into perspective of asking for child support as a way of advocating for my son's rights. I will be speaking to my social worker and asking for child support that will be put into a bank account for my son. Thank you. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot, should have responded, okay, that sounds good. However, know that while your future husband's son is in my care, it is only fair that he pays for the things he wants or needs as well. Being that I will be paying his father $400 a month to care for him every other weekend, he will be paying me, the other parent, $2,600 per month for the days he is in my care. Are we going to set this up as a daily payment or what? Comment 2, not the idiot. It's Dad's responsibility to manage the situation. She never should have even reached out to you. All communication and financial arrangements regarding your son should only be between you and his dad. And if he ends up leaving stepmom for acting like a teenager, that's on her. If I were in your shoes, I'd tell her to knock it off, or you're filing for child support wage garnishment. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So a lot has happened since I last updated you. About a week after the whole social media drama, I got a call from my son's school. They said my son had been acting out, which was really unlike him. He's usually a pretty well-behaved kid. When I sat him down to talk, he burst into tears and said he didn't want to go to his dad's house anymore. He said his stepmother was always yelling at him and calling him names. I was furious, but tried to stay calm for his sake. I asked him if he had told his dad, and he said his dad just told him to listen to her because she was in charge when he wasn't around. I immediately called his father and told him what our son had said. He seemed genuinely surprised and promised to talk to his fiancée about it. A few days later, he called back and said they had a big fight about it. She denied everything and accused our son of lying to get attention. He said he didn't know what to believe, but promised to keep a closer eye on things. Meanwhile, I went ahead and filed for child support. I figured if they were going to make a big deal about money, then it was time to make things official. I also started looking into getting a lawyer to revisit the custody arrangement. I didn't want to take my son away from his dad, but I needed to make sure he was safe and happy. Then about 2 weeks ago, I made a huge mistake. I was so stressed out and angry that I posted a long rant on social media about the whole situation. I didn't name names, but it was pretty obvious who I was talking about. I thought it would make me feel better, but it just made things worse. My son's stepmother saw the post and went ballistic. She started sending me nasty messages and even showed up at my house one night, screaming and threatening to call the police. I had to call the police myself to get her to leave. After that, things got really tense. My son's father called and said he wanted to take me to court for full custody, claiming I was an unfit mother. I was shocked and scared, but I knew I had to fight back. I got a lawyer and started gathering evidence to show that I was the primary caregiver and that my son was better off with me. In the middle of all this, my son's behavior at school got worse. He started having nightmares and wetting the bed, which he hadn't done in years. I took him to a therapist who said he was showing signs of severe anxiety and stress. She recommended that he take a break from visiting his dad's house until things calmed down. I told his father about the therapist's recommendation, and he was surprisingly understanding. He agreed to let our son stay with me for a while, but he still wanted to go to court to sort everything out. I was relieved, but also worried about what would happen next. As we prepared for the court case, I started to learn more about my son's stepmother. It turns out she had a pretty rough childhood and had been in and out of foster care. She had a lot of unresolved anger and trust issues, which probably explained why she was so hostile towards me and my son. I felt a little sorry for her, but I knew I couldn't let her take out her issues on my child. During one of our court hearings, my lawyer brought up the social media posts and messages from my son's stepmother. The judge was not impressed and ordered a temporary restraining order against her. She wasn't allowed to contact me or my son until the case was resolved. My son's father was devastated, but he agreed to comply with the order. With the restraining order in place, things started to calm down a bit. My son's behavior improved, and he seemed happier and more relaxed. I continued to take him to therapy, and he slowly started to open up about his feelings. He said he missed his dad, but was scared of his stepmother. I promised him that I would do everything I could to make sure he felt safe and loved. As we waited for the final court decision, I started to reflect on my own childhood. My parents had a messy divorce, and I spent years bouncing between their houses. I remembered how confusing and scary it was, and I realized that I didn't want my son to go through the same thing. I decided to reach out to his father and see if we could come to some sort of agreement outside of court. We met at a coffee shop and had a long, honest conversation. I told him about my own experiences and how much I wanted to protect our son from the same pain. He listened and shared his own struggles with co-parenting in his relationship with his fiancée. We both agreed that our son's well-being was the most important thing and decided to try mediation instead of going through a lengthy court battle. The mediation process was tough, but it helped us come to a better understanding of each other's perspectives. We agreed on a new custody arrangement that gave our son more stability and allowed him to spend time with both of us in a safe and supportive environment. His father also promised to work on his relationship with his fiancée and make sure she got the help she needed to deal with her issues. So that's where we are now. Things are still a bit tense, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction. My son is doing better, and I'm hopeful that we can create a more positive and stable environment for him. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.